And now, the Lowdown, with economist and political strategist Elson Lowe.
Good evening. Welcome to the Lowdown. Good to have you here. Welcome to the Lowdown. Thank you for joining us tonight. Folks, we've got an interesting program for you tonight. We've got really the government at their worst, PvP at their worst. So we're going to run you through all these things, folks. But my word, what is going on? This has been quite a week, and we've seen really a lot of frustration in Guyana. We're gonna give you a sense of the economic side of these things, a sense of how it is that you can understand what's going on in Guyana. We're gonna give you a sense of it all here on the Lowdown. We've got a race for public servants that's been announced, and we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about whether it's appropriate, whether it's enough of a raise, whether people are missing out. We're going to give you a sense of all of that tonight, folks, here on the Lowdown. Thank you for starting your Saturday night on a high with Elson Lowe. You know that we love being here with you. We love chatting with you on a Saturday night. And we're going to have an entertaining show as always, even though we've got to parse through a lot of the usual PvP nonsense that you see out there, folks. So share the link. Let's bring everyone in. Let's give everyone a chance to see what we're talking about here tonight on the Lowdown. Folks, we've got a range of topics that we want to discuss with you tonight. We've got a range of topics that we want to discuss with you. We're gonna talk a bit. We've got quite a few memes of the week, actually. So we're gonna go into that for a bit. Quite a few memes of the week. So we're gonna talk about that. We're also going to talk about the salary increases and where there haven't been salary increases. We're gonna talk about that. We're also going to talk about the mayor and city council and what has happened regarding the removal of vendors. You may have heard of the protests that have ensued as a result of that, and of the I think the real negative energy that's filled the city as people are outraged by what's happened with the vendors. So we're going to talk about that. We're also going to talk about a little bit about the oil and gas industry. We're going to talk a little bit about what we heard at the last press conference, what we said at the last press conference. And finally, folks, we're going to talk about some of the benefits that can come from raising public sector salaries. I'm going to give you an idea from around the world of what can really happen in the tourism industry in Guyana. Now, you'll recall that we've mentioned before that in Guyana, we've got a tourism industry that is not really taken off, and where the government has made really strides that are not significant. So we're going to talk about some of the key things that are missing from getting that tourism industry in gear and how it can really benefit Guyanese. So I'm going to give you some perspective. We mentioned this at our last press conference, and we're going to want to dive in on it and give you a good sense of what is going on in that industry. So folks, share the link. Let's bring everyone in. Let's give everyone a chance to see the show. Welcome to the Lowdown. It's always good to be with you. I'm your host, Elson Lowe. And this is going to be another fun one, folks. So share the link. Let's bring everyone in. Let's give everyone a chance to see the Lowdown tonight. Folks, we're going to just give you a sense of the some of the upcoming events as well with the PNCR, so you know what to look out for. That's going to be the green line. We're going to give you a look at that in just a minute. So share that link. Folks, you know, this has been a crazy week, an absolutely crazy week in Guyana. Really unfortunate things have been escalated, and of course, we want to see people's rights being respected, rather than just having the local government organs run roughshod over. PvP having no regard for local government and no regard for the city council in particular. We've even seen in newspapers comments on this particular issue. So, folks, welcome to the Lowdown. We're going to get rolling in just a second. So, share that link. Share that link. Let's give everyone a chance to see it. We've got some memes of the week that we're going to get into in a second that you should really enjoy. Yeah, pretty classic, pretty classic performance by the government. So folks, share the link, share that link. Let's bring up the first of our memes of the week as we go here. All right, so there we've got Gordon Mosley saying that this street should be named Hopscotch Street, given the number of potholes. Folks, we'd like you to look at the number, look at that street and count how many potholes you see. And folks, if you could comment below on how many potholes you see, that'd be great. Let's see if someone can spot all of the potholes on that street. That might take you a while, right? I think I see in the bottom corner, I think I see 6 potholes in that bottom corner. Bottom on the bottom, I guess that's the right-hand side, folks. That is a lot of potholes. So, folks, look at that. We've got Hopscotch Street. The other thing I would ask you is, do you think that you could walk on this street and not get wet? I don't know. I'm not sure that that is possible. Can you imagine as well, folks, if you had to drive on this street? And, folks, we are going to bring up a meme that you're going to love. Look at this street, folks. Look at all the potholes in this street. My word, this is unbelievable. Folks, these potholes, some of them look so deep you could bathe in them. Folks, not that I'm recommending that you bathe in these potholes, but they look pretty deep. So we've got several potholes that are very large and so many more potholes that are small by comparison. My word, look at this street in Providence. And so Providence is supposed to be an up-and-coming area where we're seeing a lot of the schemes, the new housing schemes, where some of the international folks who are working in the oil and gas industry and so on might be working. And so it is anticipated that that's an area that would have to have the best of roads. But look at this road. Oh my goodness. Can you imagine? Can you even walk on that road without getting wet? Crazy, crazy, crazy. But folks, that's not all. Because one of the things that many Guyanese have said over the years is, how are you going to have all of these fancy cars in Guyana? How are you going to have all these fancy cars? And you've got roads like this. Folks, how is that going to work? How is it that we're going to have this wealthy country, wealthy economy, everything is going great, and you've got potholes that are deep enough for people to swim in? Folks, we mentioned to you that there's a way that we can estimate that there'll be thousands and thousands of Guyanese who are going to have Lamborghinis in only a few years and other sports cars. The country is becoming immensely wealthy. We're going to paint that picture for you from various angles. But the first thing we want you to have a sense of is that this is the type of situation that we're going to see with the roads in Guyana. Of course, we saw in the last supplemental, the budget government passed $18 billion for the upgrade of roads. But folks, supplemental budgets are supposed to be for emergencies or situations where you don't really anticipate something. The government did not anticipate that there'd be trouble with Guyana's roads. We had previously said on a press conference that Guyana is a country where there's more potholes than rivers. And Guyana has some of the most rivers of any country. So once again, we are, I think, proven quite right. But let's go to the next slide, folks, as we look at this crazy road with so many potholes. Whoa, folks, a Lamborghini. Folks, it started to happen. They're arriving. As we mentioned to you, there's going to be huge vehicles. There's going to be a huge number of high-end vehicles that will gradually make their way to the economy. And we've mentioned that people around Georgetown can own, the thousands of people who can own a Lamborghini within a few years. We've mentioned all of that, folks. We have given you a sense that that is something that is going to happen. Folks, look at that bright green Lamborghini. Wouldn't you like a Lamborghini, folks? Wouldn't you like a Lamborghini? Folks, it looks nice. I personally don't like Lamborghinis, but that's me. We've got a gentleman there who's able to get himself a Lamborghini. Yeah, we're happy that he's able to get a Lamborghini, but it looks like he's getting ready to drive that Lamborghini. But one thing I want to point out to you folks, as we look at this lime green, is that what they call that? Lime green Lamborghini. Folks, I want you to take a quick look at something about this Lamborghini. And folks, you may have spotted it already. Those of you who are familiar with cars, like cars, that Lamborghini is real low down to the road. You see the space between the road and the Lamborghini? Tiny, almost no space between the road and the Lamborghini. Man, that is tiny. Operator, if we can go back to the previous slide. Folks, look at this road. Can you imagine that Lamborghini driving in this road? Folks, it's absurd. This is government. This is. We've got a country with roads like this. The country is growing fast enough, and there's all sorts of businesses going on that you're starting to see generation of people being able to afford Lamborghinis. But these are the roads that they have to drive the fancy cars on. Folks, isn't this ridiculous? Isn't this situation absolutely ridiculous? Where you've got a road that looks like this, a road where you can't even count the potholes. There's so many potholes that you can't even count it, folks. That many. I mean, it's got to be what, 15? No, there's got to be like 50 potholes in this picture when you sit down and count it carefully. So you've got a huge number of potholes. Absolutely enormous number of potholes, folks. My goodness, this is crazy. And folks, we've got Lamborghinis starting to arrive in the country, and we've heard that there's other ones that are coming in now. We don't know how these folks have gotten their Lamborghinis, but we're sure that many people will be able to as the country develops. That's something that is very possible. But you got to drive this Lamborghini on these roads. You know, in Guyana, we say that you're going to brock it up. B-R-U-K, brock. Well, I'm pretty sure that these roads would absolutely brock up a Lamborghini. Absolutely broke up a Lamborghini. This is as seeing a road like this and a Lamborghini arriving in the country. Viewers, we're gonna take let's just get another look at that Lamborghini. Let's just pull another look up at it. Isn't it great? Well, you know, some people really like those Lamborghinis. Look at them. It's very unusual, very noticeable. Can't miss it. Folks, do you think this vehicle is gonna last for, I don't know, 6 months without needing maintenance with these roads? I'd be pretty skeptical of that, which is really unfortunate. Isn't that unfortunate that this person has gone ahead and gotten themselves a premium vehicle, and that premium vehicle is probably not gonna last 6 months? My word, folks, my word. Look at that. Oh my God, look at those back wheels. Big back wheels. Look at the ground clearance. Not much space between the road and the vehicle. Ouch. Ouch, folks. That is tough. That Lamborghini is toast. And that's not the way that it should be. We want all Guyanese to be happy. We want all Guyanese to have the best that is on offer to them. And we don't want them to have to repair their vehicles every 6 months because the potholes are utterly unbelievable. But one of the things we also want to point out to you is we spoke months ago about the expectation that Guyana is so wealthy that you're going to start to see high-end vehicles. Folks, we take this opportunity to remind you. Folks, do you remember us saying Guyana has the second most barrels of oil per person of any country? And if we have more barrels of oil per person than Saudi Arabia, where, as you can, I don't know if you've seen it on YouTube or you've seen it around, but it's pretty well known. You've got endless Lamborghinis and Ferraris and all sorts of great vehicles in Saudi Arabia. You're starting to see that gradually in Guyana, right? But at the same time, you've got roads like the one that we showed you just now. So you've got a Lamborghini, but you're living with these roads. This is the Guyana that the PDP intends to deliver, where you've got all these fancy cars, but we're not actually getting our infrastructure right. And so people's vehicles are getting broken up in only a short space of time. Operator, let's bring that road back on for one last look at it. Folks, that Lamborghini, real low. I don't know how it's gonna make it through those roads. Probably you're gonna get water in by your feet there. You're in the vehicle and you're bouncing up and down because of the roads. My goodness. And yeah, I mean, these are sophisticated vehicles. I don't know if they can handle having water in the engine floating around there. Oh my goodness. This is what we're looking at right now in this country. Unbelievable. But the cold hard facts, my word. Let's skip on past the question of the Lamborghini, the lime green Lamborghini. Let's move on past that. Let's go to the next slide after that. There we go. Next slide. Now we've got, folks. No, you're not looking at. I know that you may look at it and say to yourself, is it that they're painting? Is it that they're painting the front fence? Is it the front fence in at the office of the president there? Is it that they're painting that green and blue? Is that what they're going for? A green and blue effect? No, folks. Actually, they were looking to repaint the green office of the president pillars. You know, the gate in front, very large, solid fence and gate. They're looking to repaint it in blue, but they repainted it in the middle of in the middle of the rain, in the middle of the night, apparently. And so what happened is that by the morning, half of the paint had washed away. Folks, you can't make this stuff. Look at that. Look at that. You've got the paint actually washing away before our very eyes. In their haste to paint over, I guess they didn't consider the fact that it's raining. This is probably not the season to do that. Or at least, and this is just my humble opinion, you should use outdoor paint. I don't know what kind of paint they use there, folks. I don't know, but it strikes me that if you paint something now, shouldn't be washing off by the morning. Hard-earned taxpayer dollars being literally washed away. And isn't this a great metaphor for what's going on with the oil money, where we've seen a massive budget, huge budget, and you're struggling to see where this budget has gone. Just imagine that they paint this fence, and by the morning, it's washed away. Goodness me. And of course, folks, you may recall that this is just opposite. This is just opposite where we saw vehicles learning to swim on Coffee Square, where the water was so high that vehicles kept plunging off. So, and what you're seeing, and there it looks like the flood waters are very high. What you're seeing is that it may be that some of the waters over the course of the night didn't drain off, and they actually impacted the paint a bit, because that water looks like it's right at the fence. Goodness me, that is what is going on. Goodness me. So what has happened is they're going to have to paint that, start all over again. All that we would advise here on the Lowdown, we would gently advise, make sure that you use outdoor paint. Just a humble suggestion. Next time, use some outdoor paint, because I don't know if that is what's supposed to happen. Okay, folks. So we've got we've got some. Like I said, it was going to be an entertaining set of memes of the week here, folks. Absolutely entertaining, and that's what we've got. We are seeing we're seeing the real works out here. Unbelievable that is what we're seeing. And folks, this is the office of the president. It's equivalent to the West Wing at the White House. It's where the president's supposed to work. How embarrassing that this is happening at the president's office itself. How embarrassing. Goodness me, really unfortunate. All right, well, as we're on the topic of green here, let's talk about the green lime. Yes, folks, we want to remind you that we've got a green lime here at Congress Place that's going to be on the 26th of December. Come out and support. Come out with your families. Come out and have a good time. Blow off some steam. Let all of the stress of this year flow off. We know that it's been stressful for you folks. Absolutely stressful. Let that blow off. We don't want you to be carrying that stress around all year. So let that blow off, folks. So we've got a green lime here at Congress Place. Come out, enjoy yourselves, have a good time. It's going to be fun. It's going to be on the 26th of December. The theme is fed up, and I know that many of you are fed up with what's going on in the country. Absolutely fed up, and for the average citizen who's struggling with the cost of living crunch, You must be absolutely fed up with what has been happening. I'll say something that's pretty funny though. I think that the guy who bought the Lamborghini is also pretty fed up with the quality of the streets. But anyway, that's just a side note for you there, folks. Man, can you imagine that every 6 months you gotta repair that vehicle? It must be that what 10 grand to repair it. Anyway, folks, on the flip side, what we've seen is virtually no cost of living relief this year. Very limited cost of living relief in a time when it is the most needed. So that's why we're saying come out to the green line, enjoy yourself, blow off some of the steam, blow off some of this fed up energy that I'm sure that you've got all pent up this year. And as we go along with the show, I'm gonna give you a sense of some of the reasons why you should be so fed up, because we've been kind of talking about it. We want to give you a bit of a better sense of it as we go forward. So we're going to talk a bit about these public service. We're going to talk about it. So there you go, green line, come out and have a good time. It's about the Ghana Youth and Student Movement. And it's going to be really fun, a really fun way to blow off some steam and to celebrate the holiday season, even as the PPP does everything in their power to make it miserable for so many people. And we're going to get into that right now, actually. Let's get the next slide up and let's keep things rolling as we continue here on the Lowdown. Let's get the next slide up there, folks. So we actually saw the mayor of Georgetown lying down on the ground to stop stalls from vendors being removed. We actually saw that. Now, this incident has since escalated. We saw the arrest of the mayor. We saw the arrest of MP Cheryl Duncan. We saw the mayor make some comments which he later apologized for, which were not appropriate. But at the same time, I think what's happened is there's been a lot of hot tempers and people are angry and frustrated. It's Christmas time and the government is looking to remove vendors from the side of the road. Now, what is really important to note about this is a particular street that is under the control of the mayor and city council. So the government has no real authority, the central government, to remove the vendors along this road. And indeed, the vendors, it's well known by city council and they are fine with them being there. Now, even if there is a need to move the vendors, what really should happen is that, and this is why it's so important that city council is able to handle these issues. You talk with the vendors, you look at other areas where they can be moved, and you look at areas where they can be able to earn a good living. And city council is able to handle it in a way that is best for the community and best for the vendors. Instead, you've got a central government coming to remove the vendors without really giving us, I think, a proper and certainly publicizing a proper plan for those vendors to be removed and for them to go to a place where they can have similar commercial opportunities. So that is why there's a principle in governance where you want to have as much as possible governance localized so that people who are most familiar with the circumstances can offer the best advice as to how to deal with those circumstances. So city council, knowing the vendors, knowing the area, knowing the history of that, would have been able to give the best advice as to how to work with the vendors to locate them in a better spot if they want a better spot. What we've instead got is the central government coming in there, violating the rights of the city council, the legal authority of the city council to remove the vendors. And that, of course, has caused the issue to escalate and in a really unfortunate way, given that it's Christmas time, given that we want the vendors to be able to have a comfortable, be able to earn some money in Christmas time and live comfortably. That is what has happened. But folks, here's some of the background to this from an economic perspective that we want to share with you. And here's what we want to give you a sense of. We just saw the government pass a 50% increase, around about 50% for healthcare workers in many areas. Now, these vendors are the vendors who are posted opposite the hospital. And so what you should expect is that they would have gotten more business from the fact that the people at the hospital are earning more. So what has happened is that the government is, in essence, freezing those vendors out from the economic benefits that would have come from the spending, the additional spending that we would anticipate from those in the healthcare profession. And that now has meant that the economic benefit has been limited versus what we would otherwise have expected. Really unfortunate. But that now, I think, is where we need to take a step back. And I want you folks to engage in a visualization exercise with me as I walk you through what is going on as the country grows, as the country becomes vastly wealthy, and what the government is doing that is totally, totally off and totally wrong-headed. Now, we saw an 8% across the board increase for public servants, retroactive, which barely kept pace with inflation, barely kept pace with inflation. And by the end of the year, it may be that inflation is higher than that. We're waiting on the final estimates. So that's the first thing that we saw. Now, in addition to that, we've seen the government announced salary increases for police officers, which amounts to another, 10%, give or take, around there, between 10 and 15% when you add everything up. So not substantial increases. And then we saw for healthcare workers around about a 50% increase. But these increases take place from January going forward. They're not retroactive increases. Folks, it's a 50% increase, right? But the budget for this year was 50% bigger than last year's budget. Doesn't that mean that this 50% increase was supposed to be a retroactive 50% increase? And not just a retroactive 50% increase for the healthcare workers, but for the public service as a whole? Now you may say, oh my God, 50% increase, that's crazy. And we in the opposition have said at minimum 25%. But if you're spending 50% more on everything in your national budget, why are you not spending 50% more on your public servants? Are they somehow less important than they were last year? Has something changed to make public servants not important to the function of the economy? Strange, right? Now, folks, what that means is that public servants essentially have been robbed of the 50% that they should have gotten retroactive for this year. And that next year, there's only healthcare workers who are going to be able to benefit from that 50%. So public servants have been robbed twice, right? Now, 50% and then another 50%, is that 100% that public servants have been robbed? Very interesting. Isn't that interesting that over a 2-year period, public servants would have been robbed of something like 100% increase, 50% this year, and then next year is 50%. So if you think about it in dollar terms, let's say that you're earning $200,000. Now, for this year, you're not getting a retro. So that would have been 100,000 times 12, 1.2 million. Next year, you would have been getting additional funds, an additional 100,000 per month. So that's another 1.2 million. So folks, all of a sudden, you're behind by $2.4 million. All of a sudden. Whoa, and then, recall that next year, the government budget is likely to grow about 20%, maybe a little bit more than that. Given that we're going to have access to more oil revenues, of course, we made more oil revenues this year. And given that we expect the country's economy to grow by another 20% next year. And so that's another 20%. We're going to have to wait to see if they give a retro of 20% next year, but I'd be pretty surprised if they did that. Now, this means that public servants are falling back in terms of being paid a proportionate amount to the budget. And the budget, of course, is proportionate to the wealth of the country. Wealthy countries can have a much bigger budget than poorer countries. They have more money to spend. So what's happening is public servants are falling behind. Of course, we in the AP and UAFC will not allow public servants to fall behind. That is ridiculous. And later on in this show, we're going to show you in more detail some of the benefits of our policies and of paying public servants well. So we're going to go into a little bit of detail around that. But folks, that's what's happened. Public servants are falling behind in terms of their income, And that, I think, should really concern, first of all, the public servants. But second of all, Guyanese who might be looking to benefit from public servants spending more. Public servants spending more on various items throughout the economy, buying more food, buying more appliances, buying more furniture, maybe investing in the place for themselves to live. All of that has been reduced relative to what it would have been. But folks, it's easy for me to say that. What I want you to do for me now is you can close your eyes if you'd like and just take a second, take a deep breath, a couple of deep breaths. And I want you now to visualize a 50% increase across the board for all public servants. What does that mean? This is a retroactive increase that comes at Christmas. Christmas time, everybody's looking to be merry and have a good time, help their family out, help their friends, have a good time with their friends, do improvements to their houses. So we're talking about, for each public servant, over $1 million or around about $1 million of retro that they have access to now at Christmas time. What can they do with that? Well, they can go to the shops and spend. All of a sudden, you have all the shopkeepers smiling. You have all the stores smiling. They can take some of that money and they can save it. So all of a sudden, you have more deposits at the bank. So the bank is also smiling. It has more money on hand to lend. That means interest rates can fall and the economy can move forward. On the flip side, you have now people are able to buy not just the lowest possible, the lowest quality foods that they typically might buy, but they may say, well, let's try and have a healthier diet. Let's buy better food. So you have health impacts that are improved because all of a sudden Guyanese are much wealthier. You have now Guyanese are able to spend more on maybe getting a vehicle so that they can take care of their family. They don't have to be in dangerous forms of public transportation. That's another thing that can happen. Now you've got more money in households. You can have people investing more in their children, investing more in their children's education, and so on and so forth. Folks, here's what we want to help you to understand. Because it is easy for us as Guyanese not to quite grasp what is going on in the country. Guyana grew by more than 50% this year, nearly 60%. The country's economy is much larger in this 1 year. The government budget is much larger, but the government has not spread that wealth to public sector employees by ensuring that their pay match the increase in the wealth of the country and the size of the government budget. That means that we've had a sharp increase this year alone in inequality in Guyana, where those who have access to assets like housing, like the stock market, and so on, can have major gains in their assets. But those who are relying on their wages have had their wages stagnate, not go up by much over the course of the entire year. When you add to that the fact that we've got a serious cost of living dilemma in this country, a very serious cost of living dilemma in this country, what you see is that we've unfortunately got an acceleration of inequality in Guyana and people's lives getting worse rather than getting better. This country is immensely, immensely wealthy, but politicians, PAP politicians have not, first of all, I think they have themselves are struggling to come to grips with what's happening because it's happening so quickly. But second of all, I think a lot of this is deliberate because they've demonstrated that they can give a 50% increase. It's possible to do that. Now, folks, just to give you some of the background to what led to this increase, you may recall that over the course of the year, we've heard things like, you can't give a big increase, it'll cause inflation. You can't give a big increase, we're already running a budget deficit. So now that there has been a big increase given, does that mean that everything that was said before is either a lie or does not make sense? Is it all of a sudden people realize that this is possible? Folks, what is going on here is that you have a rich country and you have a group of people that are intent on not letting the population as a whole benefit from the riches. That is what is going on in plain and simple terms. And so you've already seen public servants miss out on what they should have gotten this year. Next year, you're seeing only certain categories of public servants benefit, not the broader public service. And then we're going to have to see whether this trend continues and public servants continue to fall behind and the economy grow and people on the lower end of the income scale continue to fall behind. That is really, I think, the major concern that we have to look at going forward. It is nice that some people are able to start bringing in Lamborghinis, and we want to see many people succeed in Guyana. But we want to see broad growth. We want to see broad progress in people's lives. That's what we want to see. Now, it may interest you to know that the same 200,000 that we're talking about, a public servant may have been earning, and they may have been able to move from 200,000 to 300,000 in income for next year. We could have seen that across the public service. Folks, we've got a taxation system in this country and various other systems that help to make it difficult for people to progress. But I can tell you this, in the States, if you looked at it, for you to purchase a Porsche, nice vehicle, a Porsche, the cost really is around about $500 a month, which is $100,000 a month. Now, we just talked about a $100,000 raise that public servants could have gotten. It is entirely possible for people in Guyana to be very comfortable and very well off. We just have to get our policies right and share the immense wealth. What is going on is that there's a deliberate effort not to allow people to benefit. A high-end vehicle, you could be paying about $100,000 a month for your high-end vehicle. Folks, you could easily have gotten $100,000 a month across the public service increase this year. Why? Because the budget is big enough to facilitate that. The country's growth is fast enough to facilitate that. And the wealth of the country has gone through the roof in a short space of time. Folks, we've got to get wise. We've got to get wise or we're going to be left behind. We've got to get wise or the average Guyanese is not going to be able to benefit from the huge bounties that Guyana has. There is no reason for Guyanese to be punishing. No reason at all. It is a deliberate decision by the government to let Guyanese punish. Deliberate decision. Folks, now I want to give you one last bit of context. One last bit of context as we continue these unfortunate discussions. Do you recall that I mentioned to you that, do you recall this, folks? That something had happened, right? Something had happened this year that Guyana had benefited from. What was that? Oh, it was the war in Ukraine with the high oil price. And that we were able to demonstrate to you that the country made an additional $60 billion. An additional $60 billion from that. Now, folks, that's a pretty penny. Now, to give you some context, the cost of the raises that police officers received, which are very small raises, that cost was $1 billion. That's what the government has indicated, around about $1 billion. So just from the excess monies that the government made this year from the high oil price, the government could have raised police officers' salaries, right? Could have raised police officers' salaries 60 times higher than they raised them this time, than they raised them just now. 60 times higher. The cost of this raise was $1 billion, but we made $60 billion of unexpected revenue. So we could easily have raised police salaries 60 times higher. Folks, these guys are wild. And as we talk about this thing, it keeps going, right? Because next year, you're going to have another vessel come on stream producing oil, which by itself will be producing as much oil, or almost as much oil, as the whole of Trinidad when they were at their peak. The whole of Trinidad. Folks, if Guyana ends up at the same income level as Trinidad, something is wrong. There's no way. Guyana should be way, way, way richer than Trinidad. And what is going on is that the government is robbing people to the extent that it is getting to be absurd. It is getting to be absurd. We will not allow this to happen to Guyanese. We need to move this country forward. We need to move this country in the right direction. We need average Guyanese to be able to benefit and be able to feel the gains that people are feeling across the economy. It shouldn't be that it's only those that are connected to the people that are able to benefit from this growth. The economy grew 60% this year. It was the fastest growing country in the entire world. Everyone should benefit. Public servants across the board should be able to benefit. And what's going on right now is absolute nonsense, and we're not going to stand for it. Now, folks, that's one side of it. But we've also mentioned that there are other benefits to be had from giving these types of raises. There are other benefits to be had from our people-centered vision. Now, we have indicated, once you're working in Guyana, we are going to ensure that you are above a minimum livable income. And we're going to do that. Excuse me. Folks, it's Christmas time. I'm sure that many of us have a little bit of a cough here and there. So what we've indicated is that we're going to top up the salaries of people that are working in the country to ensure that no one is working, no one is earning below a certain level. We've also indicated that through student stipends, we're going to incentivize people to go back to school, to study, to build up skills, and so on. That's what we've discussed. Now, what that really means is that due to higher income levels and so on, there'll be less petty crime because people will now have access to higher paying jobs and so on, and it'll be less of a worry. And in fact, when you look at the highest income countries in the world, you'll see that they have some of the lowest crime rates. So those are some of the efforts that we're looking to do. But on the flip side, we've also talked about raising police officers' salaries so that they're not susceptible to things like bribery, so that they're able to put in more hours and so on. And we've indicated that we want to help to ensure that the city is safe. But we've also talked about the fact, and I've mentioned it, but I want to help you visualize it today, that at night in Guyana, we don't see people walking around from bar to bar, from spot to spot. Sometimes, but very rarely. And if it happens at all, it ends pretty early in the night. People will cut off at 10. People say, all right, I'm not going to be walking about this place. We're going to drive. But in many other cities, especially tourist cities, and we're going to show you here tonight three different examples. I believe we have Tokyo, London, and Paris. Where, or is it New York, London, and Paris? Something to that effect. Where we've got people in the middle of the night, this is midnight, walking around. And it's tourists. You can see them taking photos. You can see them enjoying themselves, going out to bars and so on and so forth. And we're going to talk about that tourism industry. But before we get into those videos, I just want to share just a few facts and insights about the influence of nighttime tourism. So let's get the next slide up as we talk about this. So nightlife as an essential feature for the tourist sector. This is an article that's been put out in one of those tourist websites. You know, there are lots of them. I indicated that 23% of those traveling to Spain, as an example, do so attracted by the options offered at night. That's one of the things this article had indicated. It also indicated that due to nightlife in New York, 300,000 people were employed in that city. Similarly, in London, 8% of British employment is connected to nightlife. And of course, those countries are very established going out nightlife cultures, and people are accustomed to walking in the street in the middle of the night. But folks, it is easy for me to say this, and sometimes if we've not been fortunate enough to travel, I myself have never been to London, you don't have an idea of what really this is like. So what we're going to do, we're going to give you 1 or 2 minute videos just to chat about of people in these cities walking around at midnight. So let's get the first video up, and I'm just gonna carry you through these videos a bit, and you'll get a sense of what's going on, because really we want Guyana to be a top tourist destination, and this is a beautiful city. It is an absolutely beautiful city here in Georgetown. But if you can't walk around at night, we cannot realize the full value of our glorious city. And on another opportunity, I'm going to show you a very analogous city. So here we've got a video going, and this is of, I believe this is of Tokyo at night. You've got people walking around. It's beautiful. You know, it's very visually stunning. But you've got businessmen. Look at how many people are walking around in the middle of Tokyo in the middle of the night, late at night, and look at how many people are walking around. What are they doing? They're getting something to eat. They're shopping. They're getting something to drink. They're hanging out. Look, there you go. There's nice street food. People are walking. People are looking at the city. People are enjoying themselves. Endless numbers of people right there in Japan. All right, let's take that down, and we'll look at the next city, if the operator can bring that up. But yeah, so in Japan, you've got people walking around in the middle of the night. Everything seems to be pretty normal, right? Here in Guyana, it's not normal, and we got to recognize that it's not normal. Our tourism industry could be much larger if we were able to deal with this. 8% of employment in the UK is due to nightlife. 8% of employment. You think 8% of all Guyanese are employed in the few bars that we have in this country? I highly doubt that 8% of all Guyanese, which is almost like 1 in every 10 people, is employed in that sector. But let's go and let's take another look at this. All right, so there we've got, I believe that this is Paris. Yes, you've got the Eiffel Tower in the background. Isn't that beautiful? You've got some street food. You've got people, obviously, they're getting something to eat there. There you've got the Arc de Triomphe. Very beautiful. You've got tons of people walking through the street. Again, folks, this is at midnight. This is dead night. Here in Guyana, you would not be seeing this. Well, let people feel safe. This is what we could get if we had safe streets to walk. Look at that, the Arc de Triomphe, beautifully lit up. Now you've got a public square with a monument. You could probably think of this as being the cenotaph, right by the Bank of Guyana. You know, that area there. In the middle of the night, you could be walking around that area, hanging out with your friends and so on. Absolutely gorgeous. Monument is well lit. They of course have good metro stations and so on and so forth. But very well populated. Lots of people around. People enjoying themselves. People. This is you can see on your right hand side that people are actually eating and drinking and so on in cafes on the side of the street, enjoying themselves really. Do we have many of those cafes at the side of the street? Not really in Guyana. Why? Because people worry that you're going to choke on rob and run off with your jewelry. Anyway, um, this is the way that it's supposed to look. This is what it's supposed to look like. Isn't this gorgeous? Isn't this something that anyone would want to do? Young people, wouldn't you want to be walking through the streets, hanging out with your friends, having a good time? It's midnight, it's 1 o'clock in the morning, it's 2 o'clock in the morning, you're having a good time, you're enjoying yourself. Great. All right, let's take that down, and then we'll give you one last city as we continue. So the operator will bring up the last city as we continue here. So this is something that young people, of course, enjoy a lot. Having studied in the U.S. and having lived in the U.S. for some time, I can tell you that I used to walk from bar to bar with my friends, and I have many entertaining adventures walking around in the middle of the night. Some of my most entertaining adventures with my friends. So there we have London, I believe this is. And this is not even some of the I think most popular spots in London. This is in other parts. Beautiful, well lit. Now we've got a Christmas village on Main Street, but that Christmas village closes off at 10. Closes off at 10. What you're looking at here is in the middle of the night at 12 o'clock at night. Right? And you're seeing endless people walking and enjoying themselves, families, friends there for a night out, buildings well lit, and everyone looks calm. Nobody looks like they're looking for teeth, man, as we say in Guyana. Everything looks good. People are hanging out, and you're seeing lots of young people out there. Folks, this that you're looking at right here, what you're looking at right here, is accounting for 8% of all the employment in the UK. Simple as this. You could see Georgetown looking like this. People out enjoying themselves. You have some lovely ladies there, for those of you paying attention to that. People out enjoying themselves and having a good time. There's no reason that things need to feel so dour and sad and negative in Guyana. It's that we have allowed that to be the case. And we can't keep allowing this going forward. We need to pay police officers well. We need to have a social safety net through our people-centered vision that enables people to live comfortably so they don't have to be incentivized to go out there robbing people. Not that we're excusing people who are robbing people. But we need to have a country where people are comfortable. And that can now open up other avenues of our economy and generate huge amounts of unemployment, huge amounts of employment. We've got in this country roughly, it varies from time to time, but roughly 50,000 people that are typically unemployed. As I said, it will vary a bit from time to time, but we could easily employ about 50,000 people if we are to properly develop our nightlife and our nighttime entertainment. That'll be through live shows, that'll be through bars, that'll be through restaurants, that'll be through stores opening late in the evening. So whereas a store may only, let's say a store employs 2 people for the shoppers during the day, but if you've got late shopping, as you see in a lot of these countries, then that means another 2 people have to be employed, right? So just like that, you can have a huge expansion in employment across the country. This is what we need to see. It doesn't have to be punishment central in Guyana. It is a deliberate choice by the government to let the country be punishment central. And that is really what's going on. Because as I indicated to you, we can demonstrate right now how public servants could be making 50% more. Right now, not just in the future, but in a retroactive increase, they could be getting 50% more. We can demonstrate to you right now how we can actually top up people's salaries so that they're not living right at the poverty line. We can demonstrate all these things to you because of the speed with which things have changed in the country. And the government is struggling to catch up on the one hand, and on the other hand, deliberately deciding not to let these benefits filter through to the population. Really unfortunate. And so there you have it. A beautiful walk through those streets. People are enjoying themselves. And unfortunately, in Guyana, that's not as much the case in no way, shape, or form. So I hope that just helped you visualize a bit, what is going on in other parts of the world, how things are progressing. Because not everyone would have had the opportunity to travel. As I said, I've never been to London. I'm sure that it's very nice, and I look forward to going. But that's not an opportunity I've had. And so we want people, Guyanese across the country, to be able to visualize what it's like, what it would be like if Guyana really fulfilled its potential. That's what we want you to get a sense of. What would it be like if Guyana fulfilled its potential? And that is what you're going to see under the coalition that you're never going to see under the PUP. You're never going to see that because they have no interest in letting the country fulfill its potential. Really, really sad, and just the opposite of what Guyana should be expecting now that we're seeing a lot of economic progress due to the oil and gas sector. Really, really unfortunate. Now, folks, speaking about oil and gas, we want to clue you in on a couple of the concerning things that we've come across in the oil and gas industry in the last week. And this is where we've heard that the government has begun the auction of Guyana's remaining oil blocks offshore. Now, some viewers may recall that is about a third of Guyana's offshore acreage. Quite a lot of acres, thousands and thousands. I think it's about 100,000 square kilometers. So quite a lot of offshore acreage, And the government has begun that auction. But folks, it's easy to miss these things because the government, of course, was happy to let these things slide by. We have not seen the full agreement that's going to govern the auction of these oil blocks. So we don't even know what we're really offering, the terms that we're offering to these oil companies to come. The government said that there would be consultations, but they started the block without the consultations beginning. So we don't even know what's going on. Folks, the government has indicated that there's going to be a 10% royalty for the new PSA that they're talking about. But is that royalty going to be recoverable? That is to say that the oil companies can take that out of the cost oil so that the royalty is basically no royalty. So you're telling the Guyanese it's 10%, but it's not actually 10%, it's 0%. It just looks like it's 10%. And you may say, that's crazy. How can the government charge a company 10% and then allow the company to take back out the 10%? So that Guyanese don't actually benefit at all from the royalty. That's crazy. No government would allow a country to not benefit, would put a tax on something and then allow the company to take back the tax in another way. So you're not getting anything. Who would do that, right? What's the point of putting the tax in the first place? What's the point of laying that royalty, which is a form of tax, in the first place? Nobody would do that. That's crazy. How can you say that, Elson? How can you say that? Of course, the government is not going to allow any oil company to take back the tax revenue. Folks, that is what was in the Stabroek PSA. Before the coalition changed it to stop the royalty from being recoverable, the PUP was willing to work with the PSA where you could have recovered the royalty, where you're charging the royalty to the oil company, and the oil company can take back out those funds from the profit, from the revenues, and basically you're not getting any benefit from the royalty. It may seem absurd, but that's exactly what happened before. We say all this to say that you may think to yourself it could never happen, but this is Guyana, and things that could never happen is happening. And so, as a result, we need to see that PSA. We need to see what is in that document, because I don't think anybody in Guyana should trust until they see what's in the document. There could be all sorts of craziness in the document. We need to see the full document so we understand exactly what is what. We need to see that. And until we see that, we can't be optimistic about this oil block auction and this PSA. We have no idea. It could be anything. We've also talked about the audit of the Exxon's expenses. First of all, the government didn't even want to do an audit, or actually, let me rephrase. The government let the time limit for them to check how much Exxon was spending to develop this oil, to check that, to see whether Exxon's overcharging us. The government let that time limit actually expire. It let the time limit expire. Can you imagine that? So we had to now go back and ask Exxon to let us check to see how much they were charging us. We had to ask Exxon for permission to go back and check. Oh, goodness. Isn't this embarrassing, folks? Isn't this embarrassing? We're supposed to be the ones that are in charge of our natural resources, are ensuring that Guyanese are getting a good deal. And instead of doing that, we are just refused. Well, no big deal. We're just going to let it slide. And you may say, oh, it's not much money. This is, why are you fretting over these things, Elson? Why are you fretting over these things, folks? That was 7 billion US of expenses that the government let lapse without checking to see what we were charged. 7 billion US. Now, it could be that 10% of that is inflated. So that could mean that the country lost 700 million US from not checking. Can you imagine that? Country lost 700 million US, could have lost. Now, we don't know if that's the case, but that's why you have to check. That's the first thing. The second thing is, when we hear about the audit they finally were able to do, we are hearing that this audit is just to check to see whether or not the costs Exxon claimed are valid costs to claim, and not whether or not the costs are inflated or competitive or reasonable costs. Now, you may say, oh, maybe it is that they can't check that. Doesn't how are they supposed to know that? Maybe you're pushing it too far. Folks, in the plain words of the PSA, it says that you cannot charge Guyana for your costs unless the costs are reasonable, competitive costs, which implies that the auditors must check to see whether the costs we're being charged are appropriate costs, whether they're competitive, whether or not they're inflated. They have to check that in order for Exxon to even recover these monies. So, folks, what you're seeing is that the government is not even exercising legitimate rights that Guyanese have in the plain words of the PSA itself. Wow. It's not that we are saying that there's an additional level of scrutiny that's required. It's not that we're saying investigations need to be conducted. It's that the plain words of the agreement say the government is supposed to do this, that the government has every right to do this. That's what it says. Wow. It's unbelievable. It's unbelievable. That right there could be a 700 million US loss. 700 million. And folks, we're going to have to audit Exxon a lot. Every couple of years, we got to audit Exxon all over again because they've incurred new expenses. We may have to audit Exxon 10 times. We may have to audit them 12 times. Folks, if we have to audit Exxon 10 times, and every time we're losing 700 million US because of nonsense, that means that we're going to lose 7 billion US over the course of this period. 7 billion US. Folks, we can't be serious. We cannot be operating like this. And we cannot send the message to oil companies that is totally cool. You could charge us whatever you want to charge us. We're not even going to check. We are not even going to check to see what you charged us. Can you imagine? I mean, I'm just giving an example. Let's say that it's airfare. It's expensive to go to the States sometimes. It could be that it costs you round trip, I don't know, 140,000. Expensive, right? Now, it could be that Guyana is being charged 280,000. And we are not even checking. Can you imagine that? Can you imagine that? That is what we're talking about. How is it that we, despite the plain words of the PSA saying that you're allowed to check and they can only charge you for these things if they're competitive, despite the plain words of the PSA saying that, these folks, or at least it is in doubt whether they're even checking that. We have called for the terms of reference, the actual contract with these auditors and so on, to be released so that we can see what exactly is going on. Because the news that we're getting out of the auditors is very disturbing, extremely disturbing. So, folks, that's the type of accountability issue that you have to sit down and ask yourself, what in goodness name is going on? What is going on? Now, 700 million US is not money to be sniffed at. It's not money to be laughed at. It's a huge amount of money. And as a result of being such a huge amount of money, we have to ask ourselves, what could we have done for our country with 700 million US? Folks, that's $700,000 per household. $700,000 per Guyanese household. I don't know about you, but I would love to be able to get a $700,000 at a time entitled to, as opposed to it going to some random multinational that is robbing us. Now, we don't know that we're being robbed, but this is the anxiety. And the only way to tell is through exercising our legitimate rights and checking to see. Can you imagine that? When you go and you order some food for your family, let's say order some Chinese food. If the Chinese food vendors say charge you for extra Chinese food, you notice your bill is a little high, so you check. You can imagine the PVP who's willing to just not check. Crazy, crazy, crazy. If the average Guyanese is checking when they get the food bill, how can the government have a 7 billion US bill? Folks, it's wild out here, folks. It's wild out here. On that note, we'll bring the lowdown to a close. Thank you always for tuning in. It's been fun. It always is fun. But unfortunately, we got to deal with some heavy issues, and what's going on right now with the lack of transparency that we're seeing in the audit, in the with the PSC, with the auction of the oil blocks offshore. It is really concerning. And so we want to continue to keep you informed. So keep tuned to the lowdown. And folks, you have a Merry Christmas.